Hello everyone, I'm Robert, that guy you met today. If we haven't met, go ahead and scroll through my YouTube videos and let's get to know each other. I'm coming to you today from not anywhere exotic at all. I'm actually back home here in central Georgia, and there was a video that I wanted to do before I closed out my Philippines series. And what that is I wanted to talk about 5 things that I loved about the Philippines, and then 5 things that, let's say, were a little bit difficult to adjust to as an American. Yeah, I know the description is a little clickbaity, but I really didn't see anything that I just hated about the Philippines when I was there, but there definitely were some things that were a bit of a challenge. So on that note, let's hop right into it. If there's one thing I tell everyone about our trip to the Philippines, it's about how safe we felt the entire time we were there. Every store, restaurant, mall, or just any kind of establishment that you go into, for the most part, has its own private security. And on the surface, that might sound a little ominous, but it's really not like it is in the United States, where you have these security guards that are kind of just looking for a fight to get into. The security guards there are genuinely just trying to keep you safe, and they'll help you shop in the store as well if you ask them. Americans that might be watching will all know that we've been fed a lot of false information about places like the Philippines that might make you feel like you might not be completely safe. Well, in this case, they're completely wrong. Go there, you're going to feel a lot safer there than you will at home. I can almost guarantee it. And that leads me to my next point. The people in the Philippines that you deal with are very honest. There are so many situations where people could have taken advantage of a couple of foreigners so easily, especially when it came to the tricycle taxis. At one point, we gave a tricycle driver way too much money, and he was very quick to hand it back to us and tell us exactly how that whole situation worked. Now, I recognize that this isn't always going to be the case, but we were corrected so many times by people that could have just taken advantage of us, and we would have had no idea, that I'm willing to believe that this is probably the norm. So next up is something I'm sure you've heard me talk about a lot. Everything in the Philippines is so cheap, at least by American standards. Folks, I cannot stress enough how far your dollar goes in the Philippines. This makes it a really great place to come for a vacation, just based on the fact that it's a great deal. No joke, I spent the first several days of our trip to the Philippines feeling like it was a joke that food could be so cheap. But it's not just food, it's the hotels, it's cars, it's property, it's everything is just so inexpensive. So, next up, people in the Philippines are really nice. Like, I'm talking about nice to the point that for the first few days we were there, it was actually a little bit uncomfortable. I guess in the United States, we're just used to sort of a baseline level of rudeness from everyone you encounter, but that was not the case in the Philippines. And it did take some getting used to. And I'm not just talking about hotel staff or servers, I'm just talking about strangers that I encountered. I was in a grocery store and I was a bit confused about some things that I was looking at, and this really nice guy, he saw me confused and he helped me find exactly what I was looking for and even tried to give me recipes. It was actually really cool. So the last thing on my list of my 5 favorite things about the Philippines kind of goes without saying. The food. Folks, Filipino food, if you haven't had it, you've got to find it. I knew coming to the Philippines that I loved Filipino food. And I thought that I had had some very good examples of Filipino food, but it did not compare at all to getting the real deal right at the source. And I cannot stress enough to you that if you are a foodie, if you really love to eat and you love to experience cultures through their food, you have got to go to the Philippines. I could talk about the food all day long, but this is a video. So, those are my favorites. Now let's talk about 5 things that were a bit difficult to adjust to. And I can't stress enough that these aren't things that I hated, but these were things that they were just I never quite was able to adjust to the entire time I was there, and I could probably do without. Now, none of these things are in any particular order, but this one was the most difficult for me to really work past, and that was the fact that public restrooms don't have toilet paper. And, well, what do? Well, there's a few different options depending on where you are, and I'm not going to go into that in this video, but a lot of people carry their own toilet paper. It's not unusual for someone to just have an entire roll of toilet paper in their bag, and that's just the way things are there. I was not happy about that when I saw it the first time, and I was glad to not have to deal with it when I left, but moving on. So the next one is that the Philippines seems to have an unusual relationship with air conditioning. It's like there is air conditioning, but it's not always in use. And when it is, they're not cooling the room down to 72. It's just kind of cooling it off so it's not blistering hot. So we went to the Philippines towards the tail end of the summer, right before the rainy season, and it was still very, very hot. Like, I'm talking about oppressive heat. And it was the kind of heat that is very difficult to get used to, but oddly enough, you do get used to it because you can never really escape it because of the air conditioning, or I guess the lack thereof. So next up, traffic in the Philippines is terrifying. It is some of the sketchiest traffic that I've ever seen in my entire life. But, in their defense, it looks sketchy, but it's almost like this coordinated chaos. I would never try to drive there, and I would never tell a foreigner to even attempt to drive there. It's too easy to get around using other modes of transportation that it's not even worth trying. But it's something to keep in mind that it takes a significant amount of time to go a very short distance. So keep that in mind when you're making your plans. So next up was a bit of a travel myth that was debunked for us, and it was about drinking water. And we were very nervous about drinking just water out of a glass in these restaurants that we went to because, you know, you don't want to go to a foreign country in general and drink the water because that could make you sick. But it turns out that the water that you get served in restaurants comes out of bottles. You're drinking bottled water all the time. So with that said, we realized pretty quickly that we wasted a lot of money buying bottled water when we didn't need to because the water that you were getting by default was bottled. So no, don't drink from the tap, but if you're going out to a restaurant, you don't need to spend extra for the bottled water. So the last thing on my list of things that were a bit difficult to adjust to, I kind of touched on already talking about air conditioning. And that is just the heat in the Philippines. It is unbelievable how hot and humid it can get there. Thank you, wifey, for the sweat removal. You're too kind.
You're welcome.
I wanted to touch on this separately only because this is something that it kind of changed the way that we did things while we were there. Because it was so hot that since our bodies weren't used to just being hot and sweating like that, it was very difficult to stay properly hydrated. The heat index was nearly 105 degrees every day that we were there, and then when it did rain, you would think there would be a little bit of relief, but it actually made it unbearably humid. So, jumping back to bottled water, if you're going to be out exploring the Philippines, you better make sure that you've got a lot of bottled water on you, because I cannot stress enough how difficult it is to stay hydrated when your body just isn't used to that. Well, that's it. 5 things that I loved and 5 things that were a little bit difficult to adjust to. So thank you guys so much, and thank you so much to all the new subscribers that came onto the channel because of the Philippines series. It's really great to have you, and really looking forward to showing you guys some of the cool stuff we have coming up, including the next series, which is where we actually went to New York, trying desperately to find some of the Filipino food favorites that we found in the Philippines. And hint, hint, we actually were able to find a few, so stay tuned for that. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Peace.